Welcome to this series of videos on gender-sensitive project implementation in a rural context. My name is Elna and I'm a consultant with Resilience. Over the past few months, I've conducted a gender analysis for one of our irrigation projects in rural Mozambique. This series of videos is a summary of the framework that I've used for the gender analysis, the methodology, the results, and some practical tools and recommendations for future project design and implementation in an agricultural context. This is the second video of that series in which I will further elaborate on the methodology used for the gender analysis, including some practical tips when entering new fields and working with female farmers. The project that we've performed the gender analysis for is called Absanfale, and it is located in rural Mozambique, more specifically in the provinces of Tete, Sofala and Manica. The project is fully focused on bringing small commercial farming to the next level, mostly by catalyzing FLIT processes. And FLIT here stands for Farmer-Led Irrigation Development. FLIT is widespread throughout Mozambique, and it is characterized by farmers who take the lead in their own development processes. And our project works with these types of farmers that we have labeled as small commercial farmers. And these are champion farmers. In this case, here on the slide, they are called PPCs. We take this development of PPCs and we then train other farmers as well. And we also train PPCs to train other farmers. In this case, they're called PPEs. And by this, we focus on 5 key domains, which are health and nutrition, good agricultural practices, water management, irrigation, and markets. By training farmers on these 5 key domains, we expand the knowledge and skill of smallholder farmers on how to move forward towards small commercial farming. And we intensify the knowledge and capacity to bring small commercial farming to the next level. Our methodology consisted of 4 phases, which actually the first phase is more of a phase 0. We started with literature review and expert interviews. Literature included both scientific literature and literature from organizations already having a lot of experience in gender implementation in agriculture. And expert interviews were performed with these types of organizations, for instance, including Solidaridad, Wageningen University Research, and Mercy Corps. We then went on to having conversations with our own technicians from the project. We performed a workshop with our technicians and we asked them what are the constraints that you encounter when working with female farmers in the field. And we backed that information up with data collection that we performed in the field ourselves. And so again, this was in the provinces of Tete, of Sofala and Manica. We then went on with formulating recommendations based on these findings for further project implementation and project development. And then we tested these recommendations back into the field. So we went back to our farmers and we asked them what they thought of it and if they would have any constraints or any other type of feedback that could help us improve our project, adapting to farmers' needs and priorities. The last phase is project implementation, and that is backed up with monitoring and evaluation, making sure that gender is incorporated into the feedback loop of evaluating our projects, developing our projects, and improving our projects, and so that we keep it a priority. In this particular study, we interviewed 92 individual farmers, and these were included both in groups but also in individual interviews. Besides these 92 farmers, we included more or less 15 experts and then also technicians that were included in our project. And of these 92 farmers, 70 were female and 22 were male. And then this slide refers to what we've actually done into the field. So first we started with a mapping of the community. And this is an exercise that is mostly important to do with key persons of the community. So for instance, with the SDI, and it gives you information of what is actually the access to resources that farmers have, but it also gives you an idea of the small commercial farmers already existing in the community. And so it could help you with defining your beneficiaries. Secondly, we performed group exercises. These were groups with solely women and solely men to start with, because we wanted to incorporate the view of man and women separately. And we noticed that women talk more freely, especially women talk more freely when there are no men present. Within groups, we noticed that it is very important to do some exercises. So instead of only asking questions, we included exercises to make it more lively and more interactive. And this largely increased engagement of the farmers. One of these exercises is shown here on the left of the slide, left on top, and it is a seasonal calendar, or also called a yearly calendar. So we drew out the months of the year, and then we asked farmers what are the key crops that you produce. We then started by crop defining the phases needed for that crop. So for instance, we started with preparing the field, and then we went on to planting, to weeding, and then when do you harvest and when do you sell. Then we ask questions on most labor-intensive months. When do you get your income? When do you have most of the expenses? When is there food available? And what are crucial periods? So this gave us a lot of information about a farmer's access to resources, since we got some information about their finances, but we could also ask them, for instance, about their plots and the division of their plots. So we got some information on land ownership. And it gave us information about the farmer's roles and responsibilities, since we were able to identify the most time-intensive periods in the year, and so also when the farmer has the most labor and when they are able to rest for a little bit. We backed this exercise up with a daily clock tool, in which we asked what a farmer does at what specific time in a day. And then we also asked them about the division of their expenditures to just get a more specific view of the management of their finances. But we noticed that in groups you don't get very specific information for individual situations. And so it is very important to back these group interviews up with individual interviews. So in individual interviews, we mostly ask about the farmer's situation. We asked them to tell us a little bit about their family, about their work, about their agricultural fields, and we went more in depth on the information that we already got from the group exercises. Individual interviews were also very important for ranking our recommendations. So we did a ranking exercise, and we individually asked farmers, if we would perform this into our project, would that be beneficial for your situation, or would you define it differently? Are there any suggestions? What is your feedback on this idea? While performing the field work, we noticed how important it is to collaborate with these farmers, how important it is to have a participatory approach. And one of the ground rules that we set when working with groups is that all opinions are respected. And so we emphasized this before we started with our exercises. Secondly, we noticed that exercises are a way to formulate answers collectively. So when asking a question, farmers first start to discuss the answer together. And what you see is that a dialogue comes up on priorities, on different options. And so it are these dialogues that are very important for your research, since they give you an idea of their considerations and their needs and their priorities. Thirdly, we noticed that it is important to get familiar. So this is something for you when you conduct the research, or for your technicians when they conduct the research. So when having interviews with groups of women, we noticed that a lot of these women, they sit on the ground. So what we did is that we also went to sit on the ground. But for instance, when performing interviews with men, they mostly sat on chairs, and so we would sit on chairs too. And this also means that when performing these exercises, you engage in their activities. So for instance, women, they when they started working on separating the beans, we would ask them, oh, okay, can we join you? Can we also take some beans of you and start to separate them with you? While performing these exercises and performing the interviews, there were 3 points that we noticed were actually key to increase female engagement. One observation is that when working with women, we always had to speak the local language. And so in Mozambique, a national language is Portuguese, and then you have a lot of different local languages. And when working with female farmers, we noticed that we were never able to speak fully in Portuguese, since there would always be one woman or multiple women that were not able to understand the Portuguese. Whereas when working with male farmers, we were always able to perform our interviews in Portuguese. Secondly, we noticed that it is important to be as concrete as possible. For instance, on the first day of our fieldwork, we started to conduct an exercise with women where we asked them to dream about their wishes. So we asked them the questions, if you could have everything to improve your situation, what would it be? What is the ideal situation for you if you look from now up to a year? But this was just too vague. We didn't get concrete answers, and so we didn't get a concrete idea of their needs and priorities. So we would really like to advise you to stick to familiar topics. For instance, what really helped us was when getting an idea of the technologies needed, we would ask them about their finances, we would ask them about their production, about their income, about when to sell. And then we would say, okay, so if this year you would get an increase in production and you would get an increase of revenue, what would be the first thing to spend it on? And then that would give us an idea of what technology for them is very important to invest in. Furthermore, we noticed that, especially when working with female groups, when you start to write, there wasn't a lot of engagement. So we would have these big flip overs and we would write down their answers, but they wouldn't necessarily pay attention to what we were doing on the papers. Whereas when we started to draw, this immediately increased engagement of the female farmers. So they would come to the paper, they would gather around, and then they would all have a look, and they would start also to emphasize, oh, no, you should also draw that, and you should also draw that. So it really increased engagement, and it made us feel that they were very aware of what we were actually trying to do. Thank you very much for watching the second video of this series, in which I elaborated the methodology in the field. In the next and third video of this series, I will further elaborate on the importance of carefully defining your project beneficiaries. I hope to see you in that video again.